The police and fire do what's called an after-action report. So I thought this was a good public thing to communicate with residents. What did happen? When did we know? What did we know? When did we know it? And what did we do about it? And what was our shortcomings? What was our successes? All that kind of information. So wanted to share not only with City Council, but as far as to residents, the thought process that we go through, our resources that we have available. We often don't have enough resources to do what we'd like to do or should be able to do as well. So I've asked Mr. Thonnerieux, we put together, thank you Katie for helping put this report together as well. She did some wonderful graphics. But Mr. Thonnerieux, please take it away.
Well, good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of City Council. Thanks for the opportunity to be before you this evening. And Mr. Landrum, thanks for the introduction. And yes, I agree. Katie makes this presentation look much better than I can make it look. So I appreciate that as well. Just want to take a quick moment and talk a little bit about snowstorms and how we handle snowstorms as a whole. And then talk specifically about our most recent event. Well, it's not even our most recent event. We'll talk about that just at the very end since we were dealing with snow last night. But our goal is to provide safe passage for all commuting travelers through the city of Beavercreek, and we're trying to provide the best conditions that we possibly can, keeping in mind being environmentally thoughtful and fiscally responsible. There's lots of different winter events that are out there. We've got pre-treating events, so there's times when we can use brine and put brine down on the roadways. There's other events like freezing rain or sleet, which we experienced in the most recent one. We call snow minor snow events that have 2 inches or less, and significant snow events, we call those events snow events that have greater than 2 inches. And then we often talk about compounding events, which we had a lot of last year, and thankfully not as many this year, where we have one event and we just get cleaned up, and then right back again you have another event before you can get completely cleaned up. So there's lots of different conditions that we're dealing with each time. Order of importance, I know City Council maybe received some phone calls and understands this point fairly well. But the way that we work through our priorities is we work on expressways and freeways first. The city is responsible for taking care of US 35 in the section of the city of Beavercreek. So we do have some significant lane miles there that we do have to maintain. Then we focus on principal arterial roads. Those are roads like, but not exclusive of, North Fairfield, Indian Ripple, Dayton Xenia Road. And then we start to work through major arterials. Those would be like Haynes Road over by the schools, or Alpha Bellbrook towards the south of town. Commercial collectors like Beaverview and CJ Drive are also next on the list, and then residential collectors. You can think about those that start to move through the residential plats or the neighborhood areas, things like Lakeview and Patterson. And then finally, and this is normally until the snow not accessed until the snow stops. The plat streets, neighborhood streets, residential streets, we kind of use that term interchangeably for all those neighborhood streets. Those are the final streets that we get to. And the question that we often get is, why do we do it that way? Why in the world is that the way that we do it? But we design the routes up so that we address the main roads first, getting them and then our drivers start to progress through those and then eventually get down to the neighborhoods. And we prioritize those larger roads first because they're handling the largest number of traffic, the largest volumes of traffic, and certainly the highest speeds as well. So we want to make sure that we handle those roads first and keep the motoring public safe. And then we start to work our way down to those less traveled roads that often have lower speed. I know you should be driving 25 miles per hour through our neighborhood streets. We prioritize those towards the bottom. Talking a little bit about winter storms in Beavercreek, we've got a great graphic there that's kind of outlaid in the background on the right-hand side that you can see. That's all of the roads inside the city of Beavercreek. The lines show that we have a lot to maintain, but what the lines don't show is that many of those lines have multiple lanes of traffic. So for example, Dayton Xenia Road in many places is 4 or 5 lanes wide. If you go up by North Fairfield, by the Fairfield Mall, you can experience up to 9 lanes wide. So we certainly have a lot to take care of. We're the 3rd largest city in the region by landmass and have nearly 577 lane miles of road to address. We have 11 main road routes, so like I talked earlier, when we're on our main roads, we have 11 routes that those drivers are maintaining. That does take more than 11 trucks because particularly on many of the wide roads, we're double or tandem plowing often. So it takes more than just one truck to be on one of those routes when you think about 35 or you think about North Fairfield or even Indian Ripple down by the Green. Quite a wide breadth of lane miles there. We have 18 neighborhood routes and we have 18 frontline trucks that we utilize to maintain that. This is an interesting fact. It takes a little less, but just about 400 tons of salt for us on an average storm. And of course, our staffing level, we have about 20 frontline CDL drivers in our public service division, and that's been the same staffing that we've experienced for about the last 20 years. Well, if I could talk a little bit more specifically about, again, I can't say the most recent event, but a recent event, our February 2nd winter storm. It was quite an unusual event. We were dealing with cold temperatures and then some freezing and refreezing as things popped up. We had several emergency vehicles trying to get in and out of plats that were struggling getting in and out of plats that we were pulled away from our main road routes to try and assist those folks to get back into the plats. We had multiple slide-offs because of the ice. And then the sleet and ice in and of itself was a challenge. That started somewhere around 11 o'clock on Wednesday evening and went all the way through Thursday midday. So that significant amount of sleet and ice caused us some real challenges before we even got the snow that was compounded on top of that. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. We broke our crews up into 2 different crews, so that's 11 drivers on the AM shift and 10 drivers on the PM shift. You can remember from the previous graphic that we have a total of 18 trucks, so we were not able to have all the trucks on the road based on our existing plan. That plan to go ahead and split into 2 shifts due to the length of the storm to make sure that we could provide that continued service. So we had vehicles that we couldn't put bodies in based on our plan. What did it take? We had about 1,500 man-hours in this event alone, and we used 2,100 tons of salt. Just the cost of salt alone was about $112,000. This is a significant investment when you talk Wednesday to Wednesday, just in product. That doesn't count the man-hours that were spent, the equipment usage time, breakdowns, damages. This is a significant investment for us to maintain these roads. Talk just a little bit more specifically about this event. As a whole, we started looking at this event Monday, January 31st. We have to, if we are going to pre-brine our city, we need about 3 days to pre-brine, to brine the entire city. So we had to start looking at this event on Monday, January 31st, and make the decision as to whether we thought it was going to come in as rain or if it was going to come in as sleet. And of course, as you all know, the weather forecast does what? It changes. You're right. You're right. If there's one thing you can count on, it's the weather changing. And so we have to make that decision well in advance. We decided and communicated with the city manager that we were not anticipating brining the entire city. We had made that decision Monday morning. There was just no way that we were comfortable enough with that rain. Sometimes we get it right, sometimes we get it wrong. This time we got it right. Tuesday we had another decision to make as to whether we were going to brine main and arterial roads, like we talked through that progression. And again, the weather forecast looked like it was going to come in as rain, so we were pretty determined that our decision from the previous day still held true, and we were going to hold that together. At that point, we also communicated with the city manager that we were going to break our staff into 2 different crews. The length of the storm and the amount of time that it was going to continue snowing before we were able to get into those neighborhood streets was just too long for us to be able to try and muscle all the way through. So we started to put our plan in place on Wednesday, February 2nd, and we split that into an AM and PM crew that we described earlier. I want to highlight that we also picked up some of our folks from parks, our cemetery folks, our building and grounds folks. We tried to pull all CDL drivers that we had to be able to manage those two crews the best that we could. As we look back on it now, we all know that it rained until about 11 p.m. that Wednesday night. Once that switched over, the temperatures dropped really fast, and we went from a short period of freezing rain to sleet, kind of those little ice pellets. It felt like you were shoveling a slushie, or someone had thrown a slushie out on your driveway. Back to sleet or freezing rain, and then back to sleet again. But those dropping temperatures were certainly a challenge for us for sure. On Thursday, February 3rd, the morning and night crews dealt with really heavy snow throughout that entire shift. So we switched from that freezing rain and that sleet over to the heavy snow. And again, we were still on the main roads. Friday, the snow stopped around noon. We were able to finish cleaning up the main roads, get into some of those collector streets that we talked about, commercial and residential collector streets, and then start to break into the plats by early afternoon on Friday. And so the AM crews made pretty good progress. We were actually feeling pretty good, and the temperatures started to come up, and the sun popped out just a little bit. Unfortunately, the temperatures dropped again that Friday evening, and our PM crews were very frustrated. They were not able to make the progress in the plats that they had, the AM crews had. The temperatures being so cold, everything getting compact further and further, made it very difficult for those plows. They were just skimming across the top, and the temperatures were so cold the salt wasn't really working very effectively. The next shift came back in on Saturday morning, and the sunshine came out again, and the warmer temperatures popped up, and the AM crews felt good again. Those AM crews were like, man, we're making progress. You PM crews, it's cold. It's hard for you guys to make progress. But those AM crews were making good progress. The temperatures were up, and the salt was actually starting to do its job. The challenge was we saw in the forecast that Saturday evening it was going to get very cold again and be down in the single digits. And at that point we said this doesn't make sense to bring the PM crews in. And at some point we have to shift those crews back to get them both on the same level. We made that decision. Did not bring in the PM crew that Saturday evening because of those single-digit temperatures and below freezing with wind chills, and rather tried to work with the forecast. And on Sunday, we saw that we were going to have some warmer temperatures, sunshine back out, so we tried to double our effort and get both the PM and the AM drivers in on Sunday. And we brought those folks in. We made some good progress. We were struggling with the heavy compaction again, with that freeze and thaw. Just makes that snow very, very compact, almost like you're driving on a country road. I'd like to say that was the end of the story and that we were all done and cleaned up by that point, but unfortunately Monday we had a small crew returning back into the shop. We were back in the neighborhoods, back impacting those heavy compacted areas. Several of the areas had made good improvements, but several of them were really compacted in. Tuesday, we had crews working in the compacted areas again. We started to work on our mailboxes, repairing mailboxes, repairing potholes, and again, dropping a lot of salt. Finally, on Wednesday, the crews were still working. We had some crews working on potholes, mailboxes, and the compacted areas, and with that warmer temperature and that salt working for the last couple of days, we finally got to the point where we had clear roads. This is a reminder looking all the way back Wednesday to Wednesday, so snow starting 11 p.m. Wednesday and getting cleaned up Wednesday the 9th, and our planning process starting that Monday and Tuesday before. This is a long event for us. It was a long event for our staff. I wanted to take a quick moment. Many of the city council members and mayor and vice mayor mentioned that they had received positive comments, and we did too. We received a lot of positive comments from residents, both on social media, and just a courteous and gentle wave as our drivers are going down the road means a lot to those drivers as they're there. So I wanted to extend a thank you to the to the residents. I also wanted to extend a thank you to City Council. As we mentioned earlier, this is a significant investment to be able to fight snow in the way that we fight snow in Beavercreek. And the city manager for his support. And of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't thank our public service team, those frontline workers that spent a long time here fighting the snow and working very, very hard. And for that, I'm eternally grateful for all the work